Greetings and welcome. I'm glad to have a second session with my friend Johnson Kottaram. You would recall that a little over a week ago we had a session with him based on one of his biblical reflections. The present session is unique in the sense that this is not based on the Bible and yet it is very biblical. The context of the material that Johnson has produced and shared with me is that of the falling of a tree, leaving behind its stump, and seeing the stump, certain thoughts were fired in his mind. He has written them down and shared with us. But before I go into reading the text, let me first of all show Johnson, and this is his profile picture. That's all I have with me. This is Johnson, because I thought you should have a face in mind as we share his material. This is Johnson. Have a good look at the picture. Now I have also, courtesy Johnson, a picture of the stump of the tree. This is the stump of the tree. Okay, the reflections are concentrated on this stump. Therefore, it helps to keep this picture also at the back of your mind. So I will not show these pictures again. Please pardon me. Now, without any further words of introduction to the author and the context, let me introduce the text to you. I'll make 2 or 3 points briefly, then I'll read the text, and then based on the text, I'll have a discussion with Johnson. First of all, the reason I have programs like this included in a Temple of Thoughts is because of the very purpose in starting this venture. When I thought of having a YouTube channel, the idea was not that I should share on my prospective viewers all my thoughts and ideas. The real purpose was to promote a culture of thinking. And that goal can be achieved only by as many among us as possible assuming a more positive and contributive a mindset rather than remaining passive recipients. We all can generate thoughts that will enrich the life of others and share in our midst so that we create a thinking community. That's something that I cherish very high as the goal of my life. How do we create a seeking and thinking community? As all of us recognize, that was Jesus' own goal. He said, "Seek and you shall find." Where human beings lose the capacity to think, the distinction between them and animals disappears, which is a pity. So I invite all of you to be like Johnson. Please reflect on anything that you consider to be significant. Develop that habit, and then we can share among us, the rich fruits of your thinking. The second point I want to make is that as you listen to Johnson's text and the discussions that would ensue, you realize that everything about us is significant. Most people wait for something very dramatic and significant to happen. But the right approach to life is to find everything significant, even a blade of grass. And you'll recall that that was true about Jesus Christ. That's why he said, "Behold the lilies of the field." Even the lilies of the field that we usually walk by are significant. Behold the birds of the air. How many birds have we seen, but none of them has fired the kind of thoughts that, for example, the sight of a nightingale sitting and singing would fire in the imagination of a poet. Um, and finally, I would say that we must recognize that our real treasure, or in the language of Jesus Christ, the hidden treasure, is our mind, our inner life. Unfortunately, the age in which we live alienates us from our inner life. Therefore, most people get absorbed to the world outside without developing a capacity to derive the best of the world outside. And therefore, progressively, they get hollowed out. So we have a rich world all around us, but an empty inner life. And this imbalance is actually becoming a huge problem today. It's not the occasion for me to enter into a detailed explanation of this tragedy, but all I can say is that this is afflicting us to an extent that perhaps that we haven't recognized, and therefore we need to recognize. Now, with this in mind, and requesting further that you keep the picture of the stump of the fallen tree, let me read the text that Johnson has produced and shared with me, which I now propose to share with you. It stood here once, a tree in its prime, spreading shade, shelter, and quiet beauty. Its rings still whisper the years it counted. Seasons of sun and rain, storms endured, birds nested, leaves fallen. Now only the stump remains, its crown gone, its roots still gripping the earth like a final act of belonging. That's almost poetic. Well, I dare say it's poetic. The roots of the fallen tree clinging the earth or gripping the earth like a final act of belonging. There is a kind of truth in this sight that makes you slow your step. Life, no matter how vibrant, will meet its cutting down by time, by circumstance, or by the hands of others. Yet, even here, stripped of branches and leaves, there is dignity. The stump does not protest. It simply is, weathering the long work of decay, becoming soil again. And perhaps this is the deeper lesson, not only for trees, but also for us. In our death, what truly gives permanence is not the possessions we held, nor the titles we wore, but the ever enduring values we lived every day. Love that softened another's burden, empathy that saw the invisible pain, compassion that dared to act. These are the seeds that survive us, germinating in lives we may never see, branching into acts and choices far beyond our reach. So that's the text. Now, first of all, I thank Johnson for creating this text, which then becomes our shared breakfast, if you like. I'm doing this program, I'm recording this program at 7:30 a.m. This Sunday morning. Now, let me now read again the first paragraph. Based on that, we'll have a discussion. It stood there once, a tree in its prime, spreading shade, shelter, and quiet beauty. Its rings still whisper the years it counted, seasons of sun and rain, storms endured, birds nested, leaves fallen. Now only the stump remains, its crown gone, its roots still gripping the earth like a final act of belonging. Now, I understand from this text, and Johnson can come in after I say a few words here. Johnson is actually here creating a contrast between the past and the present. In the past, this tree stood there in all its luxuriance, its youthful health and vitality. Today, all that's gone, only the stump remains. So that's the present. So there is a poignant contrast between the past and the present. Now, the question is, how are we to express or experience this contrast? When we think of the past, and all of us have a past, young people have life ahead of them, And old people like us have life behind us, but not entirely, because there is still life ahead of us, but though not to the same extent. When we regard the life we have lived so far, will we feel regretful or thankful? I consider old age to be a time of great blessing, great happiness, because old age is a condition in which you can look back and allow your heart to be filled with memories of tremendous significance, which then fill your lives, your inner life, with thankfulness. The contrary also is possible if you have lived a futile and meaningless life. Our old age can be full of remorse, regret, disenchantment, etc. So, I'm reminded also of a verse from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verse 1, where the youth are exhorted to remember their Creator while they are young, because the youth will not endure forever and old age will come. And there follows a beautiful poetic description of what old age means. Again, I will not go into details. At this stage, I invite Johnson to join us in this discussion. Johnson, how do you view this? Have I got the spirit of your text? Do you have something more to add?
Oh, yes. Well, thank you, Professor Wilson, for taking up this small write-up that I made. This stump is just only yards from my house. We have a small park, and there are since it is a small park, over maybe 100 or 200 trees there, and a few hundreds of shrubs. So probably I have been going to this for the past 20 years, every day at least 3 4 times. So this was right in front of me. I was passing by as I take my dog for walk. So he used to, go sniff and piss and all that stuff around this tree. So it is only just 2 years ago that this tree suddenly developed some disease, and the park authorities came and chopped it down. And ever since, the stump remained there. And whenever I passed that way, it brought me a special affection, or a kind of a personal feeling I had towards this tree, because I had seen it grow up. And then, beautiful tree, it was a maple tree. And then suddenly, for whatever reason, the disease came and it was chopped off. And so that always used to trigger some thought within me as I passed by. And that thought is a thing that has produced this reflection, which points to my own life, so to say, a life filled with a lot of accomplishments, a lot of flashy stuff, and so on and so forth. But someday or other, this is going to be chopped in whatever format. Either you get sick and die, or whatever. But it is a fact of life that I am going to die, and so that is how this thought began to give more depth and meaning to me. And then I began to see more of this stump, and the stump began to speak to me. And I could see the rings around it. I could see the roots spreading, going down into the ground. That it is still, although the crown is gone, the roots and whatever that is remaining is still holding on, and it is giving life in its own way, producing, I don't know, maybe saplings, maybe insects, maybe fungi. So it takes ages, maybe decades, before it would become soil again. So I put that thought into my own life. What are we? Finally, I'm also going to be like this. So the death that is going to come is going to have a very definitive understanding for me as I see what is happening in nature. It is going to disintegrate finally into its final constituents of carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and so on and so forth. So are we going to end up that way? But the distinguishing mark that I could see there is a tree. What nature has given, it produces. whereas we, the most sentient being, with the consciousness that we have a special gift of producing a character for ourselves.
Right.
And it is this character which we may call it as virtues, like compassion, being forgiving, being loving, being helpful. These are the things that is going to bring depth to the person that I am, the tree that I am, which today maybe it is on the in the Sunset Boulevard already. It's only a question of time before it will disappear. But what will sustain for a much longer time would be whatever character that I produced, which became impactful in the lives of others.
Yeah.
Which I may not know how it is going to affect other people, but definitely, if there is a goodness in my life that has produced love, forgiveness, it will bear fruit. It will become, so to say, permanent. So that is the way I look at the eternity of my own situation. I don't, look so much into heaven or hell as much as this final, you know, converging or becoming the final constituents of my own being is as science would tell us, the basic elements that we go back. No energy cannot be lost, as scientists tell us. So we will we will become return to nature, and what
Johnson,
will
here, you see, there are two aspects, or the tree has two different dimensions, or two different states. The first is the full tree standing there in its full verdure, full of tree leaves, healthy, etc. I mean, a treat to the eyes. Now it is reduced to a mere stump. Now, what I want to ask you is the the remnant of the tree, now in the shape of the stump, fired some beautiful thoughts in you. But did the living tree, in its fullness, in its richness, in all its beauty, attract your attention to the same extent? Or is it the case? Is it the case that, as far as human nature is concerned, we always recognize the value and beauty of things a little too late?
Yeah, that may be one thing. Definitely, I enjoyed watching that tree grow up, and also especially in autumn when the tree becomes very very colorful, and it was such a beautiful sight. Um, so when you consider in terms of human life, whether we appreciate things when they are in full bloom or full capacity of a human being, yes and no. Many times we take for granted. But when the absence suddenly strikes, yeah, it comes to you with a different impact and a different thoughtfulness that drives you to think again.
Right.
Of the act. Yeah.
Okay, now, for the sake of our viewers, let me explain this. The reason I asked this question of Johnson is to highlight a difference, and that is, when you see the stump of a tree, and I'm sure many of us have seen it, I have seen it, I'm sure you have seen it. We could be tempted to become, or tempted to relapse into self-pity. We'll also one day become like that. How very unfortunate. On the other hand, I find Johnson's reflections almost entirely free from the self-pitying mode. His approach is more positive, affirmative, and that can happen only if the living tree was also enjoyed by the person concerned. Those who attach no value to the living tree may not even recognize the presence of the remaining stump, because after all, it's not very visible. Or even if it is seen and recognized, to them it will become only a symbol of self pity, which doesn't help. I think that's, to me at least, that's a very important distinction, because that shows the quality of the individuals that we are. So, how we relate to the living tree and what meaning we derive from the fallen tree altogether constitute one indivisible whole, and that reflects the richness and beauty of our inner life. Now we proceed to the next paragraph where we read that even here, stripped of branches and leaves, there is dignity. Even the remaining stump of the tree, which doesn't have the kind of traditional beauty that we associate with the tree in its youthfulness, it doesn't have beauty perhaps, but it has dignity. The word is very significant, dignity. The stump does not protest, it simply is, weathering the long work of decay, becoming soil again. Johnson, would you like to say something more about this paragraph? Then I'll add a few thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. Incidentally, this reminds me of a book that I read not long time, some time back. It's called "Finding the Mother Tree" by Susan Simard. She's a forest ecologist from British Columbia in Canada, and I'm sure she will eventually get a Nobel Prize for her contribution to in discovering and telling people how to take care of trees, how to take care of forests, and so on and so forth. She's the one who scientifically proved that the underground, the mycorrhizal network that communicates between trees and bush through this root system. And so when we begin to understand the world underground, she has termed it as wood wide world. So there is so much of connectivity, there is so much of communication that is going on. One tree is able to contribute nutrient to another tree which is lacking that. Another tree is able to give water to a starving young plant. So these are all the things that is going on. Once we begin to really understand what exactly is going on, we get almost kind of mesmerized by the beauty and the intricacy that is underground between the trees, the life beneath the soil. So when we see that our own life takes a much deeper depth, a feeling that comes to you that we are very fortunate to have a world that is so full of life, unfortunately unseen by 99% of us. It's only very few who are able to see through this, and because when they don't see it, that much of depth is missing. Just like the two pictures that I sent, the second picture has got more color saturation, and you can see the depth of that stub, which is quite different from the earlier one. Similarly, when we begin to learn more and more about the life of these things, we become much richer. So that is the idea that I got from watching this and reading and understanding of this depth of communication and the intricacies of life that these trees have. It is not just merely the trees and branches that's going on externally, but there is a whole lot of inner life for these plants unseen to human eyes.
Well, I would even say that there is also interpersonal relationship between trees, though the expression may not be very accurate. Now, for example, let me give you an experience of mine. I take interest in a little bit of gardening and a bit of agriculture. So I planted a passion fruit sapling. It grew pretty well, but from as if from nowhere, another wild creeper sprouted, and they began to grow up in a sort of intertwined manner. I didn't mind it because I thought it was fine. But after about 6 months or so, when the fruiting season came, I began to think that maybe this wild plant, which is more like, shall I say, a parasite, it could it could be a hindrance. It could suck all the nutrients and starve the fruit-bearing plant, and therefore, by way of caring for the plant, the passion fruit plant, took a pair of scissors and very carefully cut the wild creeper. And I thought, I thought I was doing the passion fruit plant a favor. So 3, 4, 5 days later, when I looked at the passion fruit plant, I saw that it had withered. Now, there's no other explanation for it except the fact that my dear passion fruit plant missed its friend. That seemed to me a wild growth and an enemy to the plant was actually a very cherished friend. And very, very likely my passion fruit plant died of a broken heart. So, so all these things are happening in nature about which we do not have much of an experience, because today people live alienated from their surroundings, they are alienated from nature, and that inevitably happens in the wake of the urban materialistic culture. Now, let me further add a further thought to this. You're talking about change. In fact, change is the overriding theme of your text. But in this particular paragraph that I read out the second time, you seem to argue, and that's a message I am getting, that though change is inevitable, and we must therefore change, we cannot remain in our cherished youthfulness and vitality forever. Though change is inevitable, our relevance need not end. And the fact that we move into or creep into old age doesn't necessarily mean that we become overnight redundant or irrelevant. The tree has its own logic, which we don't always understand, but it certainly had a certain strength that did not limit its worth only to the foliage. Its stump and its roots still remain vital. Maybe another something else might sprout, or it may decay and disappear altogether. But the fact is that when the tree was alive and doing well, it did the maximum good it was possible. Everything in nature performs 100%. It's only human beings who either do not perform or perform only up to a small fraction of their potential. So the tree remains or retains its relevance, though in a changed form, for a much longer duration, whereas when a person dies, overnight, immediately, all his relevance ends and he is reduced to a corpse. So, when I think of Jesus on the cross, from the eye of the world, Jesus on the cross could be compared to the stump. Well, it is not producing any fruit. But even from the cross, Jesus is producing eternal fruits. And those fruits continue to enrich humanity. Would you like to briefly respond to this?
Oh yes, oh yes. See, the measure of life then is not how tall we stand, but in how deeply our roots of love have reached into the human heart. That is the last paragraph that I wrote.
We'll come to that. We'll discuss that paragraph separately.
Yeah. So, see, Jesus' resurrection is actually that which outlives the human flesh and blood Jesus. The resurrection As we normally, I mean, normal folks understand this, he has come back with the flesh and blood, but the way that I understand is his life has come alive for the rest of humanity in a very, very powerful way. So, which is able to live as if he had flesh and blood, but uh, the essence of resurrection is living his presence. So that presence is what the death brings to a human being if that particular human being has lived a good life, in the sense of living out values that outlive the flesh and blood body of themselves.
Okay. Now let me read the last paragraph. And perhaps this is the deeper lesson, not only for trees, but also for us. In our death, what truly gives permanence is not the possessions we held, nor the titles we wore, but the ever enduring values we lived every day. Love that softened another person's burden, empathy that saw the invisible pain, compassion that dared to act. These are the seeds that survivors germinating in lives we may never see, branching into acts and choices far beyond our reach. So here, Johnson, as far as I understand him, is talking about two different orientations. These two orientations are indicated by two different words, having and being. Most people envisage their life and their life situations in terms of having. A few understand their situation in terms of being. The spiritual outlook understands our life in terms of being. Now, as far as Jesus said, whatever we have, whatever we own, whatever we possess, will not endure. The enduring part of our being is who we really are. And in the sixth chapter of Matthew's Gospel, you have a beautiful teaching on this, but time is getting out of hand, therefore I will not go into those details. Having pertains to what we own, and it's always for our own sake, mostly for our own sake. Being is for the sake of others. And all of nature is very interesting. All of nature is built on being. Nature does not hold on to anything. Even the dying tree contributes everything of itself back to nature. Whereas we would like to surround ourselves with the things that we have gathered and hoarded, and we'll try to desperately hold on to whatever we consider to be our own, including our life, which is sought to be prolonged through all kinds of medical interventions in ICUs, CCUs, etc. So when Jesus said, "Behold the birds of the air," probably he also meant this, that the birds of the air are simply there. The lilies of the fields are there, but none of them is there for themselves. If the birds of the air are only for themselves, you don't have to see them. There is no point in you seeing them. The birds of the air, and taking to their wings, are communicating something to you. The lilies of the field, in standing there in their pristine purity and beauty, are communicating something to you, provided you are the willing to be so communicated with. So nature is full of examples of the balance between the self and the other. Whereas it's in the human world that this becomes a problem, and the self-centeredness, selfishness, or the egocentric self tries to gather everything to itself, like the rich man in the parable who died under the weight of the plenty that his land yielded. So, as Johnson meditated on the fallen stump, I suppose, he became aware of the spiritual need that each one of us faces to shift our obsession from having more and more and more, and there is no end to it, to being. And that's what Jesus says. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. You are the children of God. You are my friends. So this idea of being, and if we move into that mode, then many of these anxieties, fears, terrors about death, etc., etc., will disappear. and we'll attain a degree of inner serenity which would enable us to do justice to the life that's been entrusted to us. Johnson, your final thoughts, and on that I'll conclude.
So the final paragraph that I think you did not read is is what I said.
Yes, the measure of life.
Did you see it?
The measure of life.
Yeah, correct. The measure
of life.
The measure of
life is not how tall we stand, but how deeply our roots of love have reached into the human heart. Yeah, that's a beautiful passage. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is how I end my reflection on this. Yeah, I think that should suffice.
Okay, so to me, the text leaves us with a question. Do we neglect what really matters? Do we neglect what really matters? In our obsession with what is superfluous, do we really miss the heart of the matter? So I wish to thank Johnson for sharing his reflections with us. And again, I repeat, let's all try and develop a thinking culture so that we are not stuck on the surface of things alone, nor are we shaped by the opinions that are generated at a distance, especially in this age of public opinion, where we have no opinion of our own, no thoughts of our own. We simply become the dumping ground for the thoughts and opinions of others. This seriously compromises the integrity, beauty, and value of our own being, and the treasure that really lasts is the treasure of our being, who we are within ourselves. Because even how we see the world, what kind of relationships we build and maintain with the world, how we process the sensory data, everything depends on who we really are. Therefore, the spiritual task is to become the sort of creatures, the sort of people or individuals or persons that we really need to become. So thank you very much. And Johnson and I wish all of you a very meaningful day ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.